Welcome to SATV News. This is Tahsina Yasmin with our headlines. Interim government relies on two specific parties to survive, says Mirza Abbas. Government can take any action to help them win election. All involved in extrajudicial killings will face justice, says Home Affairs Advisor. Policemen working for candidates in election will face legal action. Over Taka 21 billion lost to corruption in climate projects during Awami League rule, says TIB. BNP's senior leader Mirza Abbas has said that the interim government relies on two specific parties to survive. Government can take any action to help them win the election, he added. He made these remarks today while addressing a memorial meeting for the late Mayor Sadiq Hossain Khoka in Dhaka. Mr. Abbas also said it is clear from the government's actions that it has no power of its own. This government is based on two parties, one created by itself and the other an older party, he asserted. Adding that this government does whatever these two parties ask it to do, he said the final proof is the use of electoral symbols. It has to follow their instructions, Mr. Abbas further added. The memorial meeting was organized by Dhaka South BNP to mark the 6th death anniversary of the late Dhaka Mayor and BNP Vice Chairman Khoka at Noyapolton. Meanwhile, Egyptian ambassador to Bangladesh Omar Mohi Eldin Ahmed Fahmi met BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir this morning and discussed various issues related to the upcoming national election and bilateral relations. The hour-long meeting, which began around 11 a.m., was held at the BNP chairperson's Gulshan office. Deputy Chief of Mission at the Egyptian Embassy, Soheila Mahran, accompanied the ambassador during the meeting. BNP Standing Committee member Amir Khosrow Mahmood Chaudhry, Joint Secretary General Humayun Kabir and Organizing Secretary Shama Obaid were also present. The meeting covered issues of mutual interest between Bangladesh and Egypt, including Bangladesh's next national election. The Egyptian ambassador reaffirmed his country's continued support for Bangladesh's journey toward a better future. The Biplobi Workers' Party today submitted a 31-point set of recommendations to Chief Election Commissioner AMM Nasiruddin, calling for electoral reforms to ensure free, fair and credible national election. A 5-member party delegation led by General Secretary Saiful Haq met with the CEC at the Election Commission Secretariat in the city's Agargaon. Speaking to journalists following the meeting, Haq said that discussions with political parties were essential before finalizing amendments to the Representation of the People Order. Among the key proposals, the party recommended the reintroduction of the no-vote system in all 300 constituencies, allowing voters to reject all candidates if they wish. It also urged the Election Commission not to increase the ceiling for campaign expenses, warning that elections would lose credibility if the game of black money continued. The Biplobi Workers' Party proposed reducing the security deposit for candidates to Taka 50,000 and limiting campaign expenditure to a maximum of Taka 25 lakh. It also suggested a coordinated public awareness campaign by the Election Commission to encourage voter participation and ensure compliance with election rules. Home Advisor Jahangir Alam Chaudhry has said that anyone involved in extrajudicial killings during the tenure of the interim government will face legal consequences. He made the remark during a briefing following a meeting of the Core Committee on Law and Order at the Secretariat today. When asked about a report by an organization claiming that around 40 extrajudicial killings had taken place over the past 14 months, Mr. Jahangir said the security forces or any force through which the killings are carried out will be brought to justice. The advisor was also asked whether the army would retain its magistracy powers during the upcoming elections. The army's magistracy power is still there, he said. Besides, Mr. Jahangir said provocative statements were being spread on social media both within and outside the country to create confusion. He added, all efforts are being made to bring back the police members who were working under the previous government and are now fleeing the country. He further warned that any policeman who works for a candidate in the next election will face immediate legal action. Transparency International Bangladesh (TIB) has said more than half of the funds allocated to climate finance from the national budget during the previous Awami League administration has been lost to corruption. From 2010 to 2024, the organization said the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund approved project allocations worth $458.5 million. Of that amount, an estimated $248.4 million was lost to corruption. The report presented at a briefing in Dhaka on Tuesday found that corruption affected 54% of the total allocations. According to TIB, the data reveals a pattern of projects being approved through political influence, collusion, and nepotism. The findings were based on an analysis of 942 projects implemented under 12 different funds between 2003 and August 2024. TIB also noted shortcomings in project evaluation, saying that of the 585 projects completed by 2024, only 90 or 15.4% underwent short-term assessments, while 495 projects or 84.6% were never evaluated for their impact. At the press conference, TIB Executive Director Iftikharuzzman said Bangladesh requires $10 billion to $12 billion in climate compensation each year. Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami will announce its final list of candidates for the 13th national parliamentary elections when it's time. According to party chief Shafiqur Rahman. Ending a 15-day foreign tour, he met the reporters at Hazrat Shah Jalal International Airport at 5:30 a.m. today. In response to a question there, the Jamaat Amir said BNP has not published its final list. I saw that they have published the list of candidates for 237 seats and again said that it was not final. There could be more changes to it. He highlighted that they also have to keep in mind the issue of announcing their candidates as part of alliances this time. Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir read out the list at a press conference in Gulshan in the evening. The Jamaat Amir left the country for Umrah on October 19th and arrived in the United States 3 days later on October 22nd. Later, he visited the United Kingdom and returned home. Government has issued the Representation of the People Ordinance 2025, allowing registered political parties to form electoral alliances while retaining their respective party symbols in elections. The Law Ministry published the ordinance in the Official Gazette. The ordinance introduced several key changes to electoral laws. It disqualifies individuals declared fugitives by a court from contesting Jatiyo Sanshad polls and removes all provisions related to electronic voting machines, a system previously introduced by the former government and widely criticized. A new provision allows voters to cast a no vote against a candidate. Importantly, candidates from alliance-forming parties must contest under their own party symbols rather than a common one. The Council of Advisors, chaired by Chief Advisor Professor Muhammad Yunus, approved the ordinance draft during its weekly meeting at Tejgaon on October 23rd. Viewers, we're taking a short break. Stay with us.
Hotel and Resorts, Jollar Par, Zinda Bazar, Silet, Bangladesh.
বাংলাদেশে দীর্ঘ ৩৭ বছরের সাফল্যের অগ্রযাত্রায় এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন আধুনিক ও শৈল্পিক স্থাপত্য শিল্পের দেশ মালয়েশিয়ার কুয়ালালামপুরে। লাখো গ্রাহকদের প্রয়োজনের দিক লক্ষ্য রেখে নিশ্চিত বিশ্বস্ততা ও আন্তর্জাতিক মানের সেবা এখন ডোর টু ডোর। SA পরিবহন Courier and Parcel Service SDN BHT 120 Jalantun HS Lee 50050 Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. SA পরিবহন Parcel and Courier Service আপনার সেবায় সব সময়।
Explore the magnificent view of Rangpur. 5-star facilities, rich chain hotel, Grand Palace. Relax in spacious rooms and suites. Enjoy local and international cuisines. Banquet and conference room. Helipad. Gymnasium.
Welcome back. You're watching SATV News. Now news from abroad. Nigerian Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar said on Tuesday that state involvement in religious persecution was impossible in Nigeria under the country's laws and constitution. He was responding to a question about US President Donald Trump's warning of possible fast military action in Nigeria if it fails to crack down on the killing of Christians by Islamist insurgents. Speaking in Berlin alongside his German counterpart, Johann Wertful, Tugar pointed to his country's constitutional commitment to religious freedom and rule of law. This is what shows that it's impossible for there to be a religious persecution that can be supported in any way, shape or form by the government of Nigeria at any level, be it federal, be it regional, be it local. It's impossible, he said. Earlier, the Nigerian presidency responded by saying that it would welcome US help in fighting Islamist insurgents as long as the country's territorial integrity is respected. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro on Monday praised UN Human Rights Commissioner Volker Turk for his recent criticism of US airstrikes in South America, calling it a step forward for international law and regional stability. Maduro, speaking on his weekly program, said Turk's statement was a welcome change and that the world needs a human rights chief who defends international norms and opposes crimes threatening the Caribbean. Later during his program, Maduro also highlighted Venezuela's long-standing military cooperation with Russia, describing it as calm, productive and set to continue. The Kremlin, on its side, called on Saturday for calm in Venezuela-US relations. The United States has built up a large military presence in the Caribbean in recent months with fighter jets, warships and thousands of troops. However, Maduro has repeatedly alleged that the United States is hoping to drive him from power.
El derecho internacional, los derechos humanos y está en contra de crímenes como estos que amenazan la.
Countries are still working on a UN Security Council mandate for an international stabilization force in Gaza and will decide on any troop deployments once a framework is complete, said Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on Monday. Fidan spoke after he and ministers from several Muslim-majority countries met in Istanbul to discuss the fragile US-brokered ceasefire in Gaza as Hamas and Israel trade accusations of violations. Some of the countries that met, which also included Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Pakistan, Indonesia and Turkey, could contribute to the force envisioned to monitor the truce. Fidan said there were some issues in fully implementing the ceasefire agreement because Israel was regularly violating it, adding Israel must fulfill its duty to allow sufficient aid as per the accord. Turkey wanted to see Palestinians ensure their own security and manage their own governance after the war, but that there were other steps that needed to be taken first, he further asserted.
Sayın Bakan, teşekkür ederim Bloomberg News'dan beri.
Aid organizations in the northern Sudanese city of Al-Dabba prepared on Monday camps and aid packages as more displaced people fleeing conflict in the northern Darfur city of Al-Fashir are expected to arrive in the coming days. The Rapid Support Forces' capture of Al-Fashir, the Sudanese army's last holdout in Darfur, marked a milestone in Sudan's civil war, giving the paramilitary force de facto control of more than a quarter of the country's territory. Hundreds of civilians and unarmed fighters may have been killed during the city's fall, the UN Human Rights Office said on Friday. Witnesses have described RSF fighters separating men from women and children, with gunshots ringing out afterwards. However, the RSF denies harming civilians. The situation in Sudan is horrific, International Committee of the Red Cross President Mirjana Spoljaric told Reuters during an interview. Al-Dabba, among other cities in Sudan, including Darfur's Tawila, has been receiving displaced people fleeing Al-Fashir in recent months. Nearly 2,500 displaced people are expected to arrive to Al-Dabba in the coming days. Iraq has pledged to bring all weapons under the control of the state, but that will not work so long as there is a US-led coalition in the country that some Iraqi factions view as an occupying force, the Prime Minister said on Monday. Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani said a plan was still in place to have the multinational anti-Islamic State coalition completely leave Iraq, one of Iran's closest Arab allies, by September 2026, because the threat from Islamist militant groups had eased considerably. There is no longer Daesh Islamic State, there is security and stability, he told Reuters in an interview in Baghdad, referring to the number of countries that have participated in the coalition since it was formed in 2014. Ukraine will set up offices for arms export and joint weapons production in Berlin and Copenhagen this year, said President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday. During a briefing, he also said that naval drones and artillery systems were among the weapons that Kyiv could export. Russia was massing troops near the eastern Ukrainian town of Dobropilya, where Kyiv's forces advanced earlier this year in a successful counter-offensive, Zelensky added. In Pokrovsk, Ukrainian troops remained under severe pressure with up to 300 Russian servicemen still in the city, the Ukrainian president further asserted. Meanwhile, China's President Xi Jinping on Tuesday sought to expand mutual investment with Russia and affirmed Beijing's commitment to advance ties despite turbulent external conditions. Xi met Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin in Beijing at the Great Hall of the People, a day after Chinese Premier Li Qiang held a meeting with Mishustin in Hangzhou, where Li said China wanted to strengthen cooperation with Russia and defend shared security interests. The Kremlin has highlighted the significance of Mishustin's visit at a time when Russia is under major Western sanctions over its war in Ukraine and looking to stem a recent slowdown in trade with China. Mishustin said it was important for both sides to continue creating favorable conditions for attracting mutual investment and supporting joint projects.
Передать вам самые добрые.
The United States will look at flexibility for U.S. troops stationed in South Korea to operate against regional threats, but the core of the alliance with Seoul will remain focused on deterring North Korea, said U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Tuesday. He spoke alongside his South Korean counterpart during a visit to South Korea that earlier included a trip to the demilitarized zone on the border with North Korea. When asked whether the 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea might be used in any conflicts beyond the peninsula, including with China, Hegseth told that protecting against nuclear-armed North Korea is the goal of the alliance. Hegseth said the two sides were still working on a joint communique expected to address talks about defense costs and other issues, adding that they had discussed South Korea making greater military investments.
가입된 나라로서 핵을 본질적으로 가질 수 없는 나라입니다.
Kim Jong-nam, the only person outside of the ruling Kim family dynasty to serve as North Korea's nominal head of state, has died. Kim Jong-nam, the former chairman of the Presidium of the country's Supreme People's Assembly and a long-time diplomat who served all three of the country's leaders, died on Monday at the age of 97, North Korea's state-run broadcaster KRT said. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited Kim Jong-nam's buyer to express condolences early on Tuesday, KRT mentioned. Born in 1928, Kim Jong-nam served in key foreign ministry positions and helped shape North Korea's diplomacy under the state's founder Kim's second son before effectively taking charge of summit diplomacy and representing the isolated North under Kim Jong-II. Under Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-nam continued to serve as the diplomatic face of North Korea, welcoming top-level visitors to Pyongyang and visiting South Korea in 2018 as head of the North Korean delegation to the Winter Olympics, where he held meeting with then South Korean President Moon Jae-in. North Korea will hold a state funeral, state media KCNA said. China and South Korea extended deep condolences over the death of North Korea's former nominal head of state. Protesters clashed with police in Morelia on Monday after the assassination of Uruapan Mayor Carlos Manzo, who was gunned down during a public festival. Demonstrators gathered outside the Mikoyakan government palace, shouting slogans and kicking doors, demanding justice and an end to violence. The protest followed Manzo's killing on Saturday, which occurred during a Day of the Dead celebration in Uruapan, a city plagued by cartel violence and extortion. Manzo, an independent mayor, had publicly called for federal support against organized crime, according to local media and authorities. New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, at his final campaign rally on Monday, urged New Yorkers to stand up to bullies, specifically referencing Republican U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to restrict federal funds for the city if Mamdani wins the election. Mamdani criticized Trump's attempt to influence the mayoral election, stating that the president's preferred candidate, Andrew Cuomo, shares his same donors, same small vision, and same sense of impunity. Mamdani argued that Trump's endorsement of Cuomo reflects his desire for a mayor who will serve his administration's interests rather than the best interests of New York City. The candidate emphasized that he will not back down to Trump's threats, saying it's time to finally stand up to the bullies that make these threats, not to become the bullies ourselves. Mamdani also drew a contrast between himself and Cuomo, stating that while Cuomo seeks to appeal to Trump's donors, he aims to speak to all New Yorkers, including those who voted for Trump in hopes of improving their economic situation. Before ending, we go through the headlines again. Interim government relies on two specific parties to survive, says Mirza Abbas. Government can take any action to help them win election. All involved in extrajudicial killings will face justice, says Home Affairs advisor. Policemen working for candidates in election will face legal action. Over Taka 21 billion lost to corruption in climate projects during Awami League rule, says TIB. You're updated with our top stories so far here on SATV. And to know the latest news, visit www.satv.tv. Stay with SATV.